when you are creating a board inside of Photoshop, some kind of layout for your project, one of the things that you've got to consider is how to manage text so that text is legible when you're up close and you're actually reading the text, but also handling text as if it's an image, so from a distance it fits into the overall composition. And one of the things that you need to be able to do with that is really control the edges of your text and not just let Photoshop do text for you. So let's start with a new file here. I'm just going to go with the A2 board layout that we've been working with. And let's look at the basics of text. So if I launch the text tool, I can just left click once and start typing. Um, typing. There we go. And then at that point, I can select 144 point is kind of large. I would say for a board, 18 point font is okay. When in doubt, stick with a simple, clean font. Don't do anything fancy. City Blueprint's overplayed. It was overplayed in the 1990s. So typically just know, don't all caps. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Okay. So let's zoom in a little bit now that we have sort of a scale for our font in terms of how it plays out on the overall board. Again, 11 point, 12 points probably too small. 18, 24 oftentimes is too big. 18 is going to typically be a sweet spot for it. So that was just simple text, left click, and starting to type. The next thing that I can do with text is I can left click and drag to create a text box. So when I have a text box, and this is what I typically recommend with Photoshop, I'm not going to type directly in Photoshop. I'm going to lay out something in Word, right? So that I have some spell check, so that I have a grammar check, and then I'm going to take that body of text and hit copy, and then I'm going to go into Photoshop and paste the text in place. That gives me the opportunity of seeing how all the text is going to work. And as mentioned, it gives me that option of seeing spell check and grammar check coming from Word. So if you'll notice, this text is justified all the way around. And to make sure that that's happening, we can do some really simple things. And let's look at layers really quick. So text is going to come in as layers by default. And we want to keep them as text layers so we can edit them. So if I select this text layer right here, I can drag that over and auto align, which is nice. But I can select this text box, back to my text tool, and I am going to highlight all of this text. So by default, I believe we're going to left justify or perhaps center or right justify. And those, frankly, they just don't look very good in a layout, right? So typically what I want to do is force justify the text. So you're going to find that tool right here under the three dots and then more properties. So if I pull up this properties tab, one of the things you're going to see are full justify, which frankly looks pretty sloppy, right? Because it's stretched out the kerning on this right here, not so good. Or your standard, what I believe this one's just called justify last left, which again is very legible. The kerning usually isn't an issue. And then from a distance, when I zoom out on this and look at the overall board, that text begins to look like an image, which is what I typically want on a board, right? I don't want sort of a jaggy edge here on the side. Now, speaking of edges, on occasion, I might need to modify this edge to fit with an image or something like that. So to do that, the easiest way to do that is to work on building a path, or I should say a shape, with the pen tool. So the pen tool is pretty easy to use. I'm going to start just by left clicking once. I'm going to hit shift to make sure that this next click is running vertically. I'm going to hit Shift to make sure this next click is running perfectly horizontal. And then I'm going to do a few clicks to begin building a curve. And then I'm going to left click to close that off. If you notice, it didn't do such a good job here. So let's look at editing this point right here. I can do that by right clicking, or not right clicking, excuse me, but I'm going to hold Control. I'm going to go to my Convert Point tool, and I'm going to hold Control and move that one single point down. Not with that one. Not with that one. Oh dear. I've forgotten how to do it. Let's see here. I left click off of everything. Convert tool. I needed to deselect. Apologize that it clicked through that a few times. But you need to deselect everything. And then it is the control. I was right on thinking about that. So control allows me, so hitting control and left clicking allows me to refine the location for each point. And it is a little bit tricky sometimes to get things perfectly aligned. So, I can use a guide and I can zoom in. And I can go back to this tool and use my control just so I can make sure that those things are aligned very close to where I want them. Now, this same tool right here, Convert Point tool, without holding control, allows me to create curves. So I'm simply hovering over the one that I want to turn into a curve. I'm left clicking and dragging out these nifty little handles, which allow me to shape and form a curve. Okay, so this essentially is a selection that is also going to show up as a layer under paths. I shouldn't say it's a layer, it is a path. So let's just call this text box 1. Okay, so now if I deselect, so let's just ignore this dude altogether, and I go to my text tool, you'll notice it's ready to start text normally, but if I go into a path, you'll see that little cursor shape change from a square to a circle. And that is essentially telling us that it is ready to fill that shape with text. So if I left click, and then I'm going to paste the text from the previous, you'll see that now my text is aligning with that shape. So if I need to control really carefully that edge, that pen tool, which is right here, the pen tool to create a path is what you want to use to make that happen.